Thank you all for coming. I'm Barry Baker, Director of Land Protection. I've been with the Land Trust for about 15 years now. Done almost any job you can think of. I used to do our easement monitoring when I was first cutting my teeth with the Land Trust. So kind of getting out there, meeting a lot of landowners and seeing a lot of our easement properties. I've also done some lease management on our Wattsville Sioux farm for a handful of years. And then most recently, about 5 years ago, took the full leap into the acquisition side of things. Tonight, we are going to be showcasing about 4 examples of our land protection toolkit. And really, the way we select the right tool for the job is based on a few different factors. First and foremost is the land trust capacity. Like, do we have the money to pay for such a transaction? What kind of stewardship obligations or long-term burden might it entail? What's legally feasible, as Brendan will discuss. We have to work with the county quite often and make sure what we would like to do is actually within reason and within the law. And most importantly, are our landowner negotiations and landowner willingness. If landowner doesn't want to sell the property's not for sale, can't do anything about it. But there are different ways to negotiate with the landowner that are creative and oftentimes can result in a conservation easement or even these novel types of easements that are really allowing the land trust a lot more flexibility in what we'd like to do on the property. But before we get into any of that, just wanted to take a step back and make sure we don't miss the forest for the trees. It's always good to take a look at what we do and why we do it. So this is really what land protection looks like. Believe it or not, I mean, most of the time I'm in my office on the phone, negotiating, doing emails, but this is why we do it. So bonus points if anyone can call out the property name as we click through. There we go.
What is it?
Roxanne.
It's in San Benito County, right along 101. It'll be the site of the Highway 101 overcrossing.
Glenwood Preserve.
Wow, we got some informed members here tonight. 3 for 3.
Wow.
What was the Lupin one?
That was at Glenwood Preserve.
This is East Glenwood.
Oh, Antonelli.
Antonelli Pond. All right, now I'm going to pass it over to Brendan, who's going to go over some terminology and some of the tools in the toolkit.
Totally. Thanks, Barry. I'm Brendan Quirk, Land Protection Manager. I've been with the Land Trust for about 8 years. Between us, we're like coming up on 25 years of experience at the Land Trust together. It's pretty crazy to think. And I came on 8 years ago and worked in the stewardship department, and then worked in the conservation strategy and planning department, and then transitioned over into Barry's shop about 3 years ago. I'm really happy to be doing this land acquisition work. So thanks for the high level, like why we do this, looking at the photos of those properties. But drilling in on land trusts, we're pretty unique in the world of nonprofits. The Land Trust has a core competency as a land manager with a focus on conservation and public access. At our most basic function, we are a buyer, owner, and operator of real property interests. And it's kind of dry, but it's just what we do. Other departments like conservation strategy and planning use other parts of the toolbox. And what we use is the real property acquisition toolkit. And so what those look like are acquiring property in fee simple title. That just means owning all the rights to the property. Or often conservation easements. And those come in a variety of different flavors: agricultural, open space easements, and what we'll talk about more, this new tool, the rolling restoration easement. And then there's like these special considerations that come up, and we'll talk about lot line adjustments, which sometimes need to be completed to complete a deal. And then we also provide acquisition and consultation support to other nonprofit partners in the region who don't specialize in real estate acquisition and need help in that arena. And then zooming up really high, talking about what real property is. So this gets at the nuts of what we do. Owning land, you own fee simple ownership, and with that comes all of the rights that come along with owning that land, that title. And this is called the bundle of sticks metaphor. Often this metaphor is used to help explain all of the rights that you get when you own land. And so you have all of these rights that are there in the bundle of sticks. What you can do is you can sell or temporarily sell some of those rights. The right to exclude people, the right to harvest something from the property in the form of a lease or an agreement, and then also in the form of an easement. And we'll talk more about conservation easements as we come along. I want to talk about how these real property transactions come to us. It's really important. So we often have landowners directly reaching out to us. Those can be members of the land trust or people who just find out about us through the grapevine. We also have people want to donate land to us. We have lots of project partners in the region, CAL FIRE or the county or other land trusts that bring us projects that they'd like to work on. Neighbors of our properties often approach us to purchase their property or purchase a conservation easement, and that's attractive to us because we're kind of building the conserved area out from something we already own. Local conservationists, biologists, ecologists, birders, people who just kind of those are really useful. People bring us these often very tempting conservation projects. And then public entities. And then we also do a lot of really comprehensive conservation planning. Our conservation strategy and planning department identifies parcels that have high conservation value, and then we directly approach those landowners. In that proactive outreach.
So we're going to get going with our first project, which is the Beach Ranch acquisition. This is a 250-acre property. The land trust protected in August of 2024, and it contributed to a strategic priority of the land trust to protect farmland at risk of flooding and increased storm events associated with climate change. For this, we used the tool of a fee simple acquisition, which is outright ownership, and with the long-term plan of retiring 65 acres from unsustainable farmland back to wetland habitat. And this has a dual benefit, not only of increasing wetland habitat in the county and allowing more habitat for different types of species, but then also to buffer some of the prime farmland inland and maintain that prime farmland so long as it's viable. Question in the back.
So was the reason you were able to acquire that was because it was becoming more and more like a wetland, and the farmers realized, look, we can't use this because it's getting salty? And
That's a great question. Not necessarily on this project, although certainly an issue in the area, and some of our other projects are exactly that. For this reason, the landowners, which I'll actually get to on this next slide, were wanting to, it was a complex land ownership, and I think they're looking to split off from years of co-ownership together.
Quick question.
Yes,
Why did we choose fee acquisition as the tool for this property?
that's a great question. Let me zoom in on the ranch. So the land ownership of this ranch, let me get to Laura's question first. There's actually a few reasons we chose fee ownership. One being that having control on a property that we like to say is at the end of the road for these wetland habitat restoration projects is really valuable. And this is something we hadn't done to this scale yet. And being at the end of the road, meaning we don't have any downstream neighbors, was really a huge benefit, and something that that we thought would be a great model to then start expanding on along the lower Wattsville Slough. There's also lease revenue associated with the property, so being able to make substantial income on the property, actually reinvest that into that wetland. Habitat restoration was really beneficial. And then just having the control to basically do what you want to do. We'll retain rights and easements. That certainly gives us the right to do phased restoration practices. But for a model and something we want to use as an example for our partners and for other land trusts throughout the nation, having that ability to really just work with the tenants directly and ensure we can do what we want to do made a lot of sense. I'll move one more slide.
Were there 3 or 4 different parcels in that, different ownerships, or all the same ownership?
Great question. So there's actually 6 different parcels. There's a couple of little ones you can't really make out here. But each parcel was owned by 3 families and a corporation in different proportions. So very complex and unique ownership. And what was significant about that is for any proposed agreement, there's 17 individual signatories that we had to come to agreement with, which, believe it or not, they all didn't see eye to eye. Yeah. But what we did have going for us, we had inroads with the families through one of our partners at the Wetlands Conservation Group.
Central Coast Wetlands Group. Right?
Central Coast Wetlands Group. And we got a meeting with the landowners early on. This was a key priority for us in the Nature Conservancy. Having that inroads was huge. And we made a joint offer with the Nature Conservancy, to do a long-term option agreement. Question in the back?
I was just wondering if it reached a point whereby it was no longer income producing, what would the land trust then do with the land?
If we ever got to that point, way down, so currently there's about 210 acres in agricultural production, of which we're going to restore about 65. But if we ever got to the point where it was all unviable for farming production, I believe it would go into restoration. But we're many decades separated from that event.
So does the land trust support land that isn't doing anything to give back?
So we're a big supporter of agricultural production, but only retiring the unsustainable fields. So one thing I should have mentioned is the retirement planning was done in collaboration with Lakeside Organics, the master tenant on the ranch. And really, they actually drew the lines of where they thought the restoration should go. And it matched up to a T with the Nature Conservancy's modeling. So it was really a cool effort to hear it basically be confirmed on the ground with the tenant, with the higher level modeling that TNC was doing.
So not all of the beach ranch is going to be restored. Some of it's going to be restored and some of it's going to be kept in for production. Is that what I'm...
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, 200.
Excuse me. Can you show us on here which part's going to be restored?
Yeah, we have a map at the end that Brendan will show, but I'll just kind of point it out here. So this is total 250 acres. Phase 1 restoration is looking something like, if you just follow my finger, is looking something like this. And then also up here, something like that, roughly. And then there's a phase 2, which adds another 18 acres or so.
There's a question here.
Did you have to negotiate with Pajaro Dunes, because it's right across their, let them, keep them in the loop too of everything?
Yeah, well, we did. We had many meetings with folks from the association, and they were incredibly supportive of what we were doing. And one, to basically reduce their flood impact as flood events increase, but then also just being able, we had a fundraising event there, and just incredibly supportive of our whole mission and especially this project.
Question.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I was looking, if you go back to the last slide.
Yep.
I know that the city of Watsonville has developed multipurpose trails on the levee of the Pajaro River. And there is a vision to have a bike to the beach access. Two options, both beach road and also the levee. So I'm wondering if that was ever part of the land trust thinking or advanced planning and how that might work, because I know the levee would require a bridge, right, to get out to the beach. And then that would probably have to land on Pajaro Dunes HOA property. It's a little multi-leveled question there.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Well, it's something we certainly were interested in at the time of the acquisition and remain interested in, although we're not currently pursuing directly in the planning on that. We do know that there are some folks doing a feasibility study currently, and I think we'll be interested in those results. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, you mentioned the bridge. It's a major hurdle, very expensive permitting and so on. I think that feasibility study is looking at other options to get the Watsonville community to the beach, including public transportation or infrastructure increases to Beach Road. So there's other options on the table. Also, there's a levee setback project along the lower reach of the Pajaro River that's in planning. It's not happening for sure, but so we got to hold off on any trail plan for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Ron.
You probably actually have a presentation to give, but I'm going to ask my question. It's such an amazing project, and from my understanding, it's a demonstration project in the sense the goal is to see how this works and potentially expand. And I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about, do you imagine extending this model down the coast to other similar properties? And then the second part of the question is the restoration part, which I'm super interested in, as you know. How much does the Land Trust think of itself as a restoration organization as opposed to this acquisition? Like the restoration is a different kind of work. Is that long-term what you're thinking Land Trust will be the restoration organization, or do you pardon the pun, farm that out to a restoration organization?
So we certainly we're spearheading the process on the restoration planning process. We'll also be highly involved in overseeing contractors for doing the actual restoration. For modeling this approach in the future, it's something we think, once successful, other organizations and other areas of California and even the country will definitely be taking a look at. And we actually have plans to expand along Lower Watsonville Slough in the foreseeable future. And Brendan's going to showcase a couple really exciting tools we're implementing directly adjacent to this project. So I think we want to, from our perspective, we want to get it right in our region before we start showcasing it on a larger venue. But things really are coming together, and our conservation and planning team are working hard on that planning process.
And to add on to what Barry just said, I think, we really enjoy bringing in partners too. We don't have to be the experts in everything. And so we really like collaborating with the people who are. And to that extent, we're spearheading the planning, but we've got this TAC, or the Technical Advisory Committee, which has over 30 different participants. Central Coast Wetlands Group is a key partner, so people that live and breathe restoration are really key to this project.
Thanks, Ron. Yep.
Yeah, I was wondering whether consideration has been given to the effect of climate change in the short term, like 50 years. Has this area been starting to be badly impacted by the serious storms we've been seeing in the last decade?
Absolutely. there's areas on this property where actually Lakeside Organics pays the lease on, but doesn't farm because it's so salty from not necessarily floodwaters coming down the slough, but from buildup as the sandbar builds up down an estuary and big wave events overtop that sandbar. The water builds, and if the tide's high enough, will actually flood the property that way. So certainly a lot of flooding that's been impacted. The other properties adjacent that we're also working on suffered in the 2022, 2023 storm events and had some significant floods there as well.
So are you saying it's being mitigated currently or will be mitigated?
Not currently being mitigated necessarily, but in the future, as we do that restoration process, we think there'll be enough of a buffer with those berms being set back and having the wetlands being able to at least buffer the floodlands from the prime ag. So as I reported, there's 3 families, a corporation that own the property, quite complex. The Nature Conservancy and the Land Trust made a joint long-term option, which is our preferred approach anytime we're going to purchase an easement or especially fee simple title. These are large numbers we're talking here. So the longer we have and the less risk with earnest money deposits, always the better. And that is key usually when we have an inroads as a landowner and off-market opportunity. So in this case, we were thinking that would be the best approach. 2 years is kind of a rule of thumb. We could probably do it in a year and a half if we really were proactive with our state agencies. And that was the offer we made, about a 2-year option agreement, fair market value for what the appraised value was. And the landowners considered it, and all but 2 of the 17 landowners were willing to sign the agreement. And unfortunately, it only takes 1 landowner in this situation to totally stifle the deal. So with that, they informed us the property was going to the open market, which is actually our biggest fear for a property that we really want to get. It's hard for us to be competitive on the open market, just given the amount of time it takes us to pull the funding together and do our proper diligence period. We have some solutions to get around that. And luckily in this situation, our solution was the Conservation Fund. So they're a national nonprofit organization who has a revolving fund that they can implement that basically they could take title to a property and quasi-protect it and hold it while the land trust uses our fundraising capabilities to eventually purchase that property from them. This model adds some cost. So there's interest and there's a fee, and it adds a lot of risk. So it's something we don't take lightly and we don't like to do often. Basically being invested and having some financial implication if we don't perform. But in this case, the extra cost and the risk was totally worth it. So we were able to acquire the property in August of 2024. Just a couple of things I would note about the financing. First of all, a complete mixed bag of donors, which was really cool. You had people donating on the agricultural protection side of things. Driscoll's and Ryderberry Farms made very sizable donations. And then you had Wildlife Conservation Board, the Department of Conservation, State Coastal Conservancy that were really just interested in the wetland habitat expansion. Yeah, Ron.
Can you explain again the role of the Conservation Fund? Did they provide bridge financing, or how did that work? I'm confused.
So so we call it bridge financing, but they actually took title to the property. So they had a purchase and sale agreement with the landowners for a little under appraised value. And then the land trust did a purchase and sale agreement with the Conservation Fund, who did a subsequent transaction about 8 months after they took title. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I was curious, why did the two holdouts swing to the National Conservation Group?
They couldn't live with themselves if they didn't see how it could fare on the open market. So they just wanted to get it on the open market. They had a realtor friend who I think he made some big promises. And we ended up settling for exactly what we offered the first time around. but except we paid more interest than we probably would have. So it was unfortunate, but it worked out.
So what was the amount?
So it was roughly $69,000 per farmable acre, which ended up being 14.8 million. And then going down the board here, 5 million from the Wildlife Conservation Board, 8 million from the State Coastal Conservancy, 900,000 from the 800,000 Department of Conservation, private foundations, and the members made up the balance. And the Pajaro Dunes Association was a big part of that as well. So that was very, very cool.
So I want to stop for a second and just give a huge thank you. Whenever we go for agency funding, there's always a gap that requires private support. And it's the members in this room that got us over the finish line. And I had the joy of initiating all hands on deck moment to the tune of like $500,000, $1 million. And our members all rallied, and it was really, really powerful. And it's such an honor to work with you all in that capacity to get these huge projects over the finish line. Yes, Ron?
You know what's really powerful from our end is that some small amount of private dollars elicits all of this public funding, so it makes us feel really powerful.
Great. Well, if anyone else has any questions, or otherwise we'll just continue on up the slough.
Right, hopping around in the slough. Thanks,
Sorry,
Barry.
click back one.
Oh, we'll go back one. Okay, perfect. And so now we're going to talk about the mini ranch acquisition, which is another fee simple title acquisition, but a little different. Our goal here was to protect existing wetland and riparian woodland habitat, and then also conserve this area that had been recently farmed but hadn't been farmed in a while, which is kind of a laser leveled flat 40-acre part of the property that had been a farm field in the recent past. And so we'd actually been looking at conservation of this property for like 15 years. We highlighted it as a target for conservation when we were purchasing Watsonville Sioux Farm in 2009, 2010. And this property just had a lot of the same characteristics of opportunities for habitat conservation and restoration. Then we'll zoom in here. It's over next to Watsonville Sioux Farm, which is in blue there. And so it shares a long boundary with Watsonville Sioux Farm. It's a great wildlife habitat. It's really secluded because it's, Beach Road is all the way over here, and then there's the wetlands complex over here, and there's no access. And so birds and deer love it out there. It's a wild, lovely place. It's also adjacent to, you can see here, the Union Pacific Railroad. So that's the Regional Transportation Commission corridor. And so the segment 17 of, the proposed segment 17 of the rail trail goes right along the property boundary. So there's awesome public access potential in the future. So the landowner listed their larger ranch, about 200 acres, and it crossed across Beach Road, huge property. They listed it for $13 million a couple years ago. And they approached Barry and said, do you guys want to buy this ranch? And we said, wow, that's a huge ranch. It's probably it's a lot of money. And we said, well, actually, we've been trying to conserve this part of your ranch for a long time. So we'd like to look at that. Can we get into a purchase agreement for just those? And so they're very willing. They're a very willing seller of this property in particular, because it was actually a drag on their listing because it's so wet and the water infrastructure for the farm is so poor that it was actually not leased. It hadn't been leased in a couple of years. And so
with the rest of the land.
The rest of the property that they're trying to sell is incredibly productive, prime ag. They're making so much money, and a future owner would make a lot of money. But this area is completely useless. It's a total drag on the listing. So we negotiate around that, and they're a very willing seller for these APNs. You know, we often talk about assessor parcel numbers. And so these 4 outlined the area that we all agreed that it would be great if we purchased from them. In initial title review, which is the first kind of part of the process that we do as a department to look at what we're actually trying to buy, you get a title report and you look at the legal description. I noticed that the legal description, the legal lots that were in the deed were in yellow. So yellow, 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 yellow. And they were these long legal lots that went, so there's only 4 of them. And they were bisected by the railroad. So at some point the county said, well, it's pretty reasonable to actually make different APNs here because they're like effectively subdivided. Right. So, but there was some weird error a long time ago where these 2 legal lots didn't even get separate APNs. So it's a mess. It's a total mess. And it's not conveyable in a deed, right? We can't buy this land. So I called a landowner and I say, we would love to buy this land, but you guys, we have to do a lot line adjustment to get we have to do a survey and legally describe this property for you to be able to sell it to us. And they said, what? So I had to tell them that they couldn't.
They'd have to do that no matter what.
Well, they're trying to sell the whole property. So they could sell, if they had a buyer for their whole 200-acre ranch, that doesn't matter to them. But if we're just trying to buy these, it matters.
It's not well defined.
Matters a lot. Yeah. So we need to get a survey. And so then we had to re-engage in negotiations with them and talk about a much longer timeline and talk about engaging with the county on what we thought was going to be a lengthy process to get a lot line adjustment. And so I want to talk about that lengthy process. Changing lot lines on commercial agricultural land in Santa Cruz County is difficult. And it's difficult for a reason, because we have strict agricultural protections. The county code reflects the law that was passed in 1978 called Measure J. And so a lot of people know about Measure J because of the affordable housing component, but there's also this huge part of Measure J that has to do with agricultural land protection. And so we as a community agreed that we have this incredible resource of agricultural land in Santa Cruz County, and we want to protect it. We want to prevent it from being converted. One of the tools that law used was to make subdivision of agricultural land very difficult and under high scrutiny by the county. And so we approached the county, and we have a great relationship with the planning department. We said, this is what we want to do. We're an advocate for this project. The landowner is totally willing. How can we get this done on a good timeline? And so what we ended up coming around to was decreasing the number of legal lots. This is an exhibit from the tentative map that we had a surveyor prepare. We decreased the number of legal lots from 4 to 3. So now we have Lot A, Lot B, and Lot C. And if we decrease the number of lots, that's favorable for agricultural production. You have fewer, larger lots. There's less building envelopes, so meaning like there's less ability for entitlements from an owner to build a house or something on that property. And it's easier to lease out to large agricultural growers if you just have lots of huge properties, lots of huge lots. So this is the configuration that we ended up getting to, and if we decrease the number of lots and we lost one legal lot, the county said, great, that is a boon to agriculture in the region, go ahead. And so we completed this lot line adjustment last year.
What total timeline to do that?
You know, we thought it was going to take a year, and it took 4 months. Because of that, because we said we'll go to bigger lots, fewer lots, and importantly, the landowner is a real estate investment trust. And so they didn't really care about the development value for the parcels. Their mission is to buy land and then deliver proceeds from the revenue to their shareholders. And they're not interested in developing properties. And so I told them, we're going to decrease the number of legal lots. Is that okay? And they said, we don't care. Go for it. And I was kind of shocked. Because a lot of other people would say, no way. Anyway, so that was great. Really kind of a miracle project. We used funding from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, National Coastal Wetland Conservation Grant Program. and the California Department of Conservation. Yeah, I'll leave it there. We purchased the property for about $1.3 million.
Which is a discount for all the work you had to do for
I wish. It is at a per acre value, that's very low for agricultural land. So it was a huge discount. Like Barry was saying, $69,000 an acre for that prime ag. And this is more like 30 or something like that. So, okay.
Great. So we'll round it off with the Estrada Ranch conservation easement. This is a project we acquired about a year ago, back in March 2025. And it's a 1,200 acre cattle ranch in the southern Santa Cruz Mountains. And the reason it was really special to us is not only for the agricultural components, about 400 acres of cattle grazing lands, about 800 acres of redwood forest that's being sustainably managed by Big Creek Lumber, but also the wildlife connectivity value with this sustainable management practices that the Estradas have been doing for over a century now in their ownership allows for wildlife connectivity and just being such a very special place to protect. This is a somewhat conventional conservation easement, meaning really what we wanted to do was prohibit any subdivision or development that would threaten that wildlife connectivity or those agricultural values. When you're on the property, you can see, I'm not hating on wine, I like wine like everyone else, but there's vineyards surrounding the property that can actually inhibit some of the wildlife movement we would like to see, as well as luxury ranchette style homes that could be kind of popcorned around this large ranch with stunning views of Monterey Bay and the Pajaro Valley. So here's the property here. We're going to zoom in on it. And now we can talk a little bit about the ownership dynamics. So as I mentioned, it's been in Estrada family ownership for well over a century. But the current ownership, or the ownership structure at the time of the deal, we had Richard Estrada, who owned this northern parcel, and then the Frank Estrada Trust, who owned these southern two parcels. And what the concern was in our early conversation with the Frank Estrada Trust, who the property was managed by Grant and Greg Estrada. They lived directly adjacent to the ranch. They're there on a daily. They oversee the cattle operation and the timber operations. Their concerns were that when Richard were to pass, as he was aging, the heirs of his trust were remote. They didn't have really a connection to the land at this point and were likely to sell to development. So it was a long-term dream of the Frank Estrada Trust and Grant and Greg, especially, to maintain the ranch in Estrada ownership and ensure that those management practices continue under their ownership. So was quite a quagmire we were in. Oh yeah.
What's the land, the protected land? That's the green.
This is Mount Madonna County Park.
Thank you.
Adjacent.
Yeah.
Funny enough, coincidentally, we also have a conservation easement on this little inholding here that was donated to us back in the early 2000s.
So there'll be this little hole in the middle?
Yeah, it's a funny little hole there. But yeah, there's a handful of homes in this area. So not really a conservation value, but the ranch does go around it. So what we were up against was a tough situation of how do we devise a plan that ensures the end result that we're looking for was Estrada ownership over the entire ranch, so that Grant and Greg can manage the ranch as a whole in perpetuity, or the Estradas in perpetuity, with a conservation easement held by the land trust, protecting the ranch from development or division of ownership. What we finally came around to after many months of negotiation and discussion was the following deal structure of having the Peninsula Open Space Trust being willing and able to jump in and actually purchase Richard Estrada's parcel from him to basically protect it and hold it, somewhat like the bridge financing that the Conservation Fund provided on the Beach Ranch transaction, except for there's no interest, there's none of that. It was just a simple purchase and a hold. Meanwhile, the land trust negotiated purchase and sale agreements for a conservation easement with the Frank Estrada Trust and now Post as the new landowner of the former Richard Estrada parcel. The plan was once the one easement overlaying the entire 1,200 acres is signed and notarized and a sealed deal between Post, Frank Estrada Trust, and the land trust as the easement holder, the property subject to the easement would then be transferred to the Frank Estrada Trust from Post. I'm going to quiz you. You guys know what? I'm going to see if you all know what you're talking about here. But really, again, as I'd say, the end result that we're looking for is the Estradas owning the entire property subject to an easement held by the land trust. And yeah, it's worth mentioning, this was certainly a leap of faith by all parties involved. The land trust, we had basically our reputation at stake in southern Santa Cruz County. This is a large ask. It was an expensive conservation easement, very complicated deal, and it's one of those families in southern Santa Cruz that there's a lot of eyes on this project, and a failure here would probably be pretty detrimental to our program for other properties. Post took a huge leap of faith on the land trust fundraising ability by tying about $10 million in that initial purchase and having faith in us to kind of back them out of the deal years later. So a lot of gratitude to Post. And then for the Estradas, this is something we worked on from the first conversations in 2018, 2019 to when we closed escrow in 2025. So a lot of collaboration there. We had, I think, every 3 weeks for 3 years, we had a call to go over how the deal is going. So it was really an intimate relationship that was still developed there, and really thankful we got through this. And diverse, another mixed bag of funding, the Department of Conservation, again, in the agricultural setting this time around for the grazing lands, contributed about $3 million. CAL FIRE for the sustainable forest management practices contributed about $4.5 million. Post provided a bargain sale to the land trust for about $2.5 million. And then again, you guys, about $2 million of our members' private donations went to this purchase. And yes.
You said a leap of faith. Had the land trust worked with Post in the past, or was this the first transaction?
We certainly have collaborated on the San Vicente Redwoods project, of which we're doing the public access planning and implementation, and Post is the fee simple landowner there. They also actually helped us on the Wattsville Sioux Farm back in 2009. There was a budget freeze, and I think Post was able to bridge that purchase, and then we took them out with grant funds a year or two later. So yeah, a great partner. Yep.
You showed us the bundle of sticks for fee simple ownership. What sticks are in this bundle when you have that conservation easement?
Good question. Basically the stick here is division of ownership. So the ranch will be owned as a whole in perpetuity. So those 3 parcels that we showed on the map, you might as well consider that one parcel as far as transferring the property or dividing ownership in the future. That said, they can still put an additional 2 homes on the property. Currently, Frank Estrada and his wife, Loretta, live on the property off of Hazeldale Road. There's the ability on the other 2 legal parcels to put homes of reasonable size, and they were cited to not have any impact on the wildlife connectivity. Any other development outside of that that's also not facilitating the agricultural use would be prohibited. So those are kind of like the two main ones.
So Frank Estrada kind of family is going to be owning. That gets complicated as time goes on with estate planning and who inherits what and what legal constructs do you have to keep that maintained, and how are you going to avoid not having 17 different people to talk with going forward?
So they currently do have it in a trust, which is a way of them to maintain ownership as a family. So you're asking how do we ensure they don't divide ownership over time?
Yeah, like when you have wills and you allocate a certain, I mean, is it going to be enforced that they have to maintain a corporation, or how is that managed?
Yeah, so the easement does specify it would have to be maintained by one entity. So currently it's an LLC actually.
Okay.
So it'll be continue to be in one ownership, and we can actually enforce that through the conservation easement.
Okay. Does Measure J help enforce it too, because you can't break up lots, or is it really just your conservation easement?
For our purposes, our conservation easement.
Okay.
So we'll ensure the rights or the provisions in the easement are enforced. We have an easement coordinator who will go out and to the ranch once or twice a year to ensure all the terms of the easement are being met. And with that, she will also be checking county records, and if she sees a division of ownership there, that's where the enforcement side would kick in.
I have a question about the wildlife variable here. As you enter this particular deal, it appears that this property is valuable because of, I'm going to say, mountain lion migration toward the Bluff Ranch, from the North County, et cetera. Do you have the right, or have you gone out with biologists to see what kind of activity occurs before you enter the transaction? And then the follow-up would be, now you have it, the easement. Are you monitoring currently migration patterns on the property?
Good question. So prior, we had data, wildlife data from the Prima project showing connectivity value there, certainly in the southern Santa Cruz Mountains, for sure are a priority for that linkage. Mm-hmm. The easement doesn't give us specific rights for doing it. We don't have any affirmative rights on the property, rather. Part of the monitoring process, we could always ask for permission to go out to do any studies and scientific studies. We haven't used those quite yet, but those are available to us. But it would take landowner permission.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you just say who's in this photo?
Greg Estrada, our executive director, Sarah Newkirk, and our board chair, Kate Anderton, and a butterfly that happened to swoop by right when I took the picture.
Yeah,
Photo bomb. Yeah.
Trust Cruz.